How many houses do you need to make $30,000 a month? Guys, how's it going? Awesome Mayo, rhymes with KO, BigRia.com. How many houses do you need in order to make a passive income of $30,000 a month? This is the 19 tips. If you're an out-of-state real estate investor and you want to buy real estate, you want to invest in real estate inside Indiana, and you're out of state, this is for you. We have 19 tips. This is tip number 4. How many houses do you need to make $30,000 a month? Here's the exact formula to reach any passive income target. We're going to go over the exact number. This is going to be a good class. This is a new series just for out-of-state passive investors who want to invest in Indianapolis passively, remotely, from out of the area. You should have at least $100,000 cash and have great credit and at least 3 to 5 years. That's how long it takes. You shouldn't want to touch that money for at least 3 to 5 years. It all comes down to how you build your team. We've talked about this many times. These are kind of the quick introduction tips here we go over every time. Have a specific passive income, equity, leverage, or liquidity, productivity, target, and asset acquisition plan. I've gone through this in other classes. You should check those out because it's really important. Your team should be able to say, listen, we're building an income of 25 grand a month, 30 grand a month, whatever, 50 grand a month, 100 grand a month, whatever that number is. You should have an idea. And once you hit your numbers, you want to reinvest that money into other assets. Passive income versus active income, or passive investing versus active investing. What's the difference? Passive investing, you just stay at your house and you write checks. That's it. Active investing, you're actually in the business. We train people on how to do that as well. The big difference though is lead generation and then lead conversion and building your fan base. Time is the most important financial decision you'll ever make. Time is like the one thing that we're all losing, right? The most important question you'll ever ask yourself is, how will I spend my time today? The most important thing you'll ever do financially with your time is determine and decide to create passive income. T3, team targets timeline. You should have, everyone on your team should know that you're making 30 grand a month or whatever your goal is. And in one sentence, you should be able to tell me how you're going to get there. This whole game is about your forever fund. It's having enough assets, enough equity that's producing a return that produces at least 10 to 30 grand a month for you. So we have our needs, wants, and fantasies. Your needs is like your foundation, your fence, and your fortress. So how much money do you need to live on? The very needs that we need to create passive income for that. Then your wants, and then your fantasies. That should be within that 10 to 30 grand a month, or at least that should be the basis. That should be your fence. I've never met anyone that can't live on 10 to 30 grand a month. So it's a good place to start. Okay, remember here, the time-money relationship with passive income requires either time or money. Now, in this case, we're talking about people who are just doing passive income. You're not going to put in your time into this, right? So here's the kind of inverse relationship between time and money to create passive income. The more time you have, or the less money you have, the more time you have to put in. But the more money you have, the less time you have to put in. Eventually, you can put in no time and just do this from your house to do total passive investing. And that's what we're talking about. So the other stuff we talk about dialogue and marketing and stuff like that, that's for active investing. This series is for passive investors who want to do nothing but sit back and make 10, 20, 30 grand a month. So we're going to talk about this exact number. I promise you, you're going to get the answer you want, the exact number of houses. But before we get there, I want to explain so you have a deep understanding of how this works. You go through this class, you're going to know more about passive income. You're going to know more about creating equity and having it productive than anybody you're ever going to meet statistically. I mean, you're going to know more about that. So I want you to know like the root of what you should really understand about creating passive income. So what determines liquidity? Liquidity, basically, there's two things. When we come to equity, there's two things that determine the equity's value. It's liquidity and productivity. Productivity, we'll talk about in a second. Liquidity means how quickly can you sell it? And basically, if I say that I worked with a business, for example, we work with a lot of companies. Let's say I grow a medical group by $1 million. And let's say I get half that. I get $500,000. So now I've grown my net worth by $500,000. But liquidity means how can I get that $500,000? And basically, these are the people we always need to work with and think about: bankers, investors, and buyers or end users. We have to get a banker to agree that I have that $500,000. You have to get an investor to agree have that it's worth $500,000, or I have to get a buyer or an end user. At least one of these three people have to agree. This is the only way we're ever going to liquidate anything. And if we look at this, one of these, they have to agree on the value in order for us to get that money out. This is important to understand what equity really comes down to: either a buyer, investor, or a banker agreeing that has equity. This is important for the Burr method, for being able to refinance. We have to be able to get our appraisals. We have to get someone to agree on the value. That's the liquidity for us to be able to refinance properties. This is how we can take the same 50 grand. The last class we did, we talked about how to use 50 grand and buy 10, 20, 30 properties. That's super important to know for today's class. But this is the thing we're always thinking about. Whenever it comes down to the value, the equity only counts if we can get a banker, investor, or some end user to agree with that. What determines productivity? This is the second part of that, right? So let's say you have $1 million in equity. The productivity means how much money are you making every year on that? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? 20% is kind of the peak. That's Warren Buffett got 20% for 40 years. That's how you turn $100,000 into $30 billion. So 20% is kind of the top. The bottom, the bare minimum that anyone could get is 5%. So we want to rely on 5%. If we do better than that, great. But 5% is what we want to rely on, and we can base all of our decisions on that. But what determines productivity? How much, when I have equity, what determines how much money I'm going to make on that? This is the annual net from the clients. So no matter what equity you have, what determines how much money you make on that is going to be the transactions. It's going to be the clients, basically. If you have a business, the clients of that business. When we have rental properties, we want to look at the renters, the tenants is the clients. And within real estate, basically we're looking at renters. That's where the productivity comes from. The rental income comes from the renters, right? The tenants. So your net income will be based on the rent ratio, the cost, and the debt service. We've talked about this in many other classes, the previous ones before this. The rent ratio, we're going to talk about that more today. The 1%, we want to have 1% houses that rent for 1% of the value of the purchase price. Your cost, meaning your upkeep, your upgrade, the average cost, taxes, insurance, all that, and your debt service, meaning your mortgage payment that you have. That's what's going to determine your income. So as soon as possible, we want to buy down our debt service. That increases our equity. Production creates equity. This is what makes real estate so special, because if you go and buy a business, you're not necessarily going to be creating equity every time you get money. If you make $5,000 a month, for example, working with a dentist, that $5,000 a month might come from like $100,000 of equity, but that's really productive, right? Because you're getting 5% a month. That's insane, but it's probably not very liquid. Nobody's going to pay you $100,000 for that unit. It's also not very long term. And real estate, there's a difference here. As soon as we're making rent, we're taking all that extra rent and we're beating it down. We're beating down that mortgage so that we're creating equity, because equity is the difference between what you owe and the value, right? Your assets minus liabilities. So this is what makes real estate really special, because real estate, the production actually creates equity. So if we're getting 1% a month and our debt service is whatever, we're taking that 1% and we're paying the debt service out of that 1% every month, and we're paying down that mortgage and creating equity. So these are important to understand. We're collecting and creating equity at the same time. You get what I'm saying? We're collecting equity whenever we buy real estate. We're collecting $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever, and then we're also creating equity. Super important to understand those two things: collecting and creating equity. The reason people aren't rich is because they don't own anything. They don't own enough shit. You got to own stuff. This is how we do it. We collect and we create equity. So the passive income formula is real simple. Passive income is equity times production. We just talked about what production is. So production is 3%, 5%, 10%, whatever. That means we take our equity. So if you have a $100,000 property and it's producing at 1% a month, what does that equal per year? Actually, let's do the math on this. We had this written out before. Well, what's the next part of this? Okay, I'll do this. We'll go over this in a second. We'll do the math in a second. We'll go with our fancy whiteboard. Okay, so the passive income formula equals equity. Passive income is equity times production, right? What that means, basically, if we have, let's say we have a $100,000 property and we go out and we buy a $100,000 property and it's worth $100,000 property, right? So at first we have mortgage on it. So our mortgage might be $50,000. Well, then what's our equity? Our equity is only $50,000, right? Because we owe $50,000, so we only have $50,000 in equity. Let's say that property rents for 1%. That means that we're getting $1,000 a month on that property, which is going to be 12% a year. And with houses, we should be around 8 to 10%. Okay, so we'll cover this in a second, the 1% thing I said. The first thing we'll look at is equity. This is the properties being purchased and paid down over time. I'm buying the $100,000 property, but I may owe $70,000 on it. Now, every time I get that rent, I pay down that $70,000. So I'm increasing my equity. So my equity is $30,000 the first month, and then it goes down a little bit every month. And I'm not including the side flip and the flip mode. We talked about that last time, how to pay down, how to accelerate the pay down. We're just talking about getting a property, taking that rent and paying down that mortgage, because that creates an increase in equity. The production here is with 1% houses, we should be around 8 to 10% production. We'll talk about that in a second. The income, we can work backwards and set our asset acquisition to be reverse engineered. So we can start saying, once we know this formula here, and I'm amazed at how many people in real estate don't know this formula. They never do it. I don't know why it's just an amazing thing. If you want to make $20,000 a month, we're going to go over exactly how to tell how many houses you need to buy and exactly what equity and production you need to have. This is a sentence that needs this is the first thing we talk about. We have teenagers doing this, man. We sit down and say, how much money do you want to make? You want to make 20 grand a month? Okay, here's exactly how to go out and get that money. Here's exactly how much equity you need at this production, and this is exactly what you need to do. This becomes your marching orders then, right? So here's how we target our properties. We target B- to C areas which produce 1% properties. Maybe above 1%, but at least 1%. We don't mess with houses usually less than 1%. 1% should be the minimum. Now, what about 2 and 3% houses? 3% houses are trap houses. Those are meth labs. They're not houses. 2% houses are okay, but there can be issues there as well. They're usually only around 40 grand, and they're usually right at the edge of these areas that are not doing so great. So we target B- to C areas generally. So if we get 1% a year, or we get 1% a month, that's 12% a year, right? Now, from that 12%, we should net about 70 to 80%. Don't look at that. Close this up here. Close that up there. So if we have 12% a year, are you writing this down? Okay, don't open the computer. Check this out. I don't know how many of you, if you already know the answer, don't say this, but if you have 12% a year, what's 70 to 80% of that? Because a bank is going to normally look at 70 to 80% of that. Assuming the property is paid off, you're going to net about 70 to 80% of that rent. If it's 12%, what's 70% of 12%? What's 70% of 12%? Okay, so, all right, if you already know it, then don't. So there's a couple ways to do that. One is a 7 times 12, so 8.4, or 8 times 12, then we could get the 9.6, but that's kind of cheating. Another way of doing that is you take the 10%, right? So 10% would be 1.2 times 3, 3.6, and subtract that, right? So that's one way of doing that. But you're right. What you had was exactly right. So you should be able to do this quickly in your head without the calculator. So we should net about 70 to 80% over time, which means that we're about 8.4 to 9.6%. That means on any single family residential house that we buy, if it's a 1% house, eventually once it's paid off, we should net 8.4 to 9.6%. We'll be safe and say 8%. Remember, all our numbers that we talk about are based on 5% because that's a bare minimum. But if we're at 8%, we're well above that now. So what does that mean as far as our numbers go, as far as our income goes? If we just use 8%, that's the production that we have. So now we know two of our targets. We know our income, we know our production. Now we just have to figure out how much equity we got to go get, right? We're not going to talk about businesses or collecting companies. We do that as well. It's a whole other thing. You can apply this to buy and sell companies the same way. But right now we're just talking about if you're just going out and training people, or if you, in your case, you're actually going to go out and buy equity, basically. You're going to go out and buy income. How much equity do you need? So if we target B2C areas, that's 8% production we use with our equity targets. So we know our target income and our production. Now we solve for our equity. So if you want to make $10,000 a month, that's $120,000 a year, right? So the question is, if we look at that, if we plug that into our system here, if we have $1 million earning 8%, that's $80,000 a year, right? But if we have $1.5 million at 8%, that's $120,000 a year exactly, right? $1.5 million of equity, right? At 8%, and we have $120,000 a year. You did this math? No, you did it perfectly. It's exactly right. But this, besides him, does everyone else understand what we're saying here? If there's any questions, right, just raise, or you can just say it out loud. I'll answer it. But this is so vital that you guys get this, because we should probably take this out. Are we putting this online, the whole thing? Yeah, but we should take parts of this out, because one of the things that people are saying and people have noticed is that I talk about 3 to 5 years where people are like, well, you're cash flowing in the first 90 days. Yeah, but that you don't want to use that money. We got to build, the whole point is we collect that equity because it's potential equity, and then we convert it to actual equity, which I don't know if we're talking about that today. But that process, we want to take all this money and throw that money down, because this 1.5 million, you don't have that up front, right? You got to pay down your mortgage to make that happen. So all we're doing right now, the entire process, we're not, this process of finding investors, we're not going to be doing this for much longer. I did this back in the day with the GRS, and the same thing happened. I didn't do it for very long. It was only a couple months, because very quickly we have enough money. And if you are watching this, we're not going to be, you're damn lucky to be working with Anna and the team, because right now we're building up enough assets to get the critical mass that the group needs, that the project needs, so that they can go out and have $100,000 a month in passive income. So right now we're actively working with investors with very little, we're not saying, oh, you got to buy 10 or 15 or have to be an accredited investor or any of that stuff. The stuff that happened with the GRS right now is a very rare time and a very unusual time. It's not going to last very long. And if you're watching this years from now, you're like, man, kicking yourself, I should have worked with them. Yeah, you should have, because everything I'm talking about right now, all these deals, the cool thing is go through the deal dissection series and you'll see all these are real life deals. We build everything based on this. This isn't some, unicorn deal. We're doing these deals every day, helping our heroes connect and do these deals. If you want to be involved, make sure you text Anna 317-969-5619 or Love It Big Ria, send her an email. This whole process here, I keep going back and forth, I should say, on whether or not we're keeping it online or not. The whole point here, everyone gets this, right? If I know how much money I need $1 million in equity. I need $1.5 million in equity. We're just going to use 8% as our production. So if 8% is our production, all I need to know is my target income. If I want to make $10,000 a month, then I need $1.5 million at 8%. That's going to be exactly $10,000 a month, $120,000 a year. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Now, what about $30,000 a month? That's $360,000 a year. To do that, I need $4.5 million at 8%. $4.5 million of equity at 8%. This is my forever fund. If I have $4.5 million of equity at 8%, I can live off that $30,000 a month or half of it. And then I never actually touch the real money. I never touch the $4.5 million. That just goes up in value. This is why we call it a forever fund. It lasts forever. That's $30,000 a month. So we're getting really close to our answer here. How many houses do you need to make? How many properties do you need to make $30,000 a month? Again, I've met 1 out of 1,000 people have the answer to how much you need to make $30,000 a month. And I'm telling you what it is right now. This becomes our North Star, and everything we do is reverse engineered around this to get our 10 to 30 grand a month at least. So $1.5 million at 8% is 120 grand a year, 10 grand a month. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Right. Yes. 8% and 1 point. Yeah, we're going to talk about the houses in a second, but I don't know. 1.5 million is going to do that. Okay. Oh, we did do the potential. Good job. So when we buy a property, when you go out and buy one of these duplexes, for example, or a house, we're buying potential equity, right? Because if it's a $200,000 property and we owe 150 on it, we only have 50 grand in equity, but we have 150 grand of potential equity, right? There's only 3 ways we could do that. How do we convert potential equity into actual equity? Number 1, we pay down that debt. That's the obvious way. We do that over time, or we do that with the flip mode, right? The side stuff. Number 2 is you increase the income, and number 3 is you increase the asset value. This is the only 3 ways, whether it's a business or anything else. If we take that potential equity and we convert it to actual equity, we have to do one of these 3 things, or all of them. And the reason why income and value are two different things. Anytime you increase the income of an asset, you've increased the value. But anytime you increase the value, you didn't necessarily increase the income, right? But anytime we increase the income, we always increase the value. But this is what we've got to do. First, we're collecting and then we're creating. So we collect the equity, the houses, and then we just start throwing down on that debt because we got to get the 1.5 million paid off. These houses have to get paid off quickly and we have to accelerate that process. So this is what we focus on almost exclusively, just pay down that debt. We don't really focus on increasing income unless it's a commercial or like a business deal. And the increase of the asset value, we don't really rely on appreciation either. So we don't need two of these three. All we need to focus on is our paying down of the debt. Does that make sense? We accelerate that process. We actually made a class last time about how to pay off your houses in accelerated fat, how to pay off your houses at light speed, how to pay off your rentals at light speed. This is how. But this is how we convert that potential equity into actual equity. Make sense? So now we know our target income in production and we can sell for equity like we just talked about. Enough of the fucking math class. Awesome. How many actual houses do I need to make 30 grand a month? Okay, let's get to the answer. All that was to set up for our answer right now. So at $150,000 per house, because remember, why do we target $150,000 houses? Why are we going for $150,000 houses? Right, because 1% houses, a house that rents for 1% of the purchase price, you'll normally only go, so a 2% house could be where? Up to $40,000. You could find a $40,000 house that rents for $800, right? You could even find maybe a $45,000 house that rents for $900, although those are becoming rare as we talked about. But it's unlikely you're going to find a $50,000 house that's going to rent for $1,000 a month. In many places in the country, people are like, a $50,000 house, what are you talking about? That's not even a down payment. That wouldn't even get the garage, right? That wouldn't even be like the septic tank, right? So if you're looking at properties where you're having $50,000, 2% houses kind of end there. So 45 grand is the limit for a 2% house. A 3% house, the limit's like 20 grand, right? Because you're not going to find a $30,000 property that rents, well, I guess there are some that rent for $900. So it ends at $30,000 would be the limit. $40,000 properties are not renting for $1,200 a month. And those are generally, you got to get, a SWAT team to collect rent every month for a 3% house. It's usually a meth lab. We don't even talk about them. 2% houses we do a lot with, but those are all in the lower price range. The 1% house, the magical place you want to be, 150,000 is about the limit, but even 150,000 is kind of pushing it. You got to really know where you're at. We have a deal dissection series on a $160,000 house, Brenda, I believe, that rents for $1,600. That's rare because as soon as you get up to $1,500 a month, can you go and rent a $200,000 house, $300,000 house for $1,500 a month? Absolutely, right? So that becomes a problem for us to maintain that 1%. As soon as we go at prices beyond $150,000, we're not staying at 1%. Does that make sense? And then all of our numbers are different now because remember, 8% is based on 12%, on 70%, 80% of 12%. So we've got to be right at that 1% roughly. 1% houses, our limit is going to be 150 and in B and C areas. That's why now we've got our criteria. This becomes our secret weapon because remember, deals are never made or deals are never found. They're always made. So our secret weapon now going in these markets, right? Going in there swinging like a banshee, right? How do we go and take over these markets? We know exactly what we're looking for. We want $100,000 to $150,000 houses, maybe $120,000, $130,000 if it's depending on the area. At 1%, we need houses that rent for 1%. So we're going to assume that we're using $150,000 houses, $150,000 1% houses, meaning they rent for $1,500. We need 10 to 30 houses because that's going to give us, if we have 10 houses at 150 grand, how much equity is that? If assuming it's all paid off, 1.5 million. If you have 30 houses at $150,000, how much is that? Equity is that? 4.5 million. That's to get our 10 to 30 grand a month. So our answer to our question here for the entire point of the class, how many houses do you need? You need $150,000 houses that are at 1%, $150,000 houses. You need about 10 to 30 of those to produce roughly 10 to 30 grand a month in passive income, right? Now, what about the $200,000 duplexes? Why do we mess with duplexes? Because if we want to produce 1% at 150 grand, right? We just talked about how hard it is to go past 1%. But with duplexes, we actually have a deal dissection on this. Brandon, I believe, that's a $240,000 duplex, 250 grand, and it rents for $2,500. We're getting it's a 1% property. One property is a 1% property at 250 grand. Very unusual. You're not going to find a house that's 250,000 that rents normally for $2,500 a month. Because for $2,500, remember we had that $500,000 property we just saw that rents for $2,100, right? It's very unusual. For a $2,500 a month rent, you can get a very nice house. You can get a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, maybe $600,000 house for $2,500 a month rent. That's why you're not going to find a 1% house, a single family house. But with duplexes, we can get 1% at 200 and 250 and even beyond around that. Does that make sense? Let's just look at 200 though, because we're doing a lot of these $200,000 duplexes. Check out our deal dissection series for these exact deals, by the way. These aren't unicorns. This exact, when you know what you're doing, you can structure and do these deals all day long. And if you're working with us, we're doing it for you. A $200,000 duplex. How many duplexes like that do you need to make 10 to 30 grand a month? Well, it's about 7.5 to 22.5 of these duplexes. So 1.5 to 4.5 million dollars. If you had 7.5 or 8 or 22.5, 23, if you had 8 to 23 of these duplexes, you'd have 1.5 to 4.5 million in equity. And we know that the numbers work out to be about 8% at least. So you'd be making $10,000 to $30,000 a month. Does that make sense? This is what we base our 1% and our asset acquisition on moving forward. Does that all make sense? Does everyone get what I'm saying? The exact numbers right now. So in the sheets you guys have, we put down your target income. Let's say you put down 20 grand, 30 grand a month. And now the next blank is what if for single family houses, how many houses do you need to hit your 15 grand a month or your 20 grand a month, right? You want to fill that in. Everyone's got that filled in. Did you guys already do this as I was talking? Okay. Now the second part is use the duplexes. How many duplexes at 1%? So from now on, as you're out there talking to people, we're always looking when we have we have the 4 lots that we're building now. We're building on them. Those vacant lots, we're building duplexes on them. I think one of them is a single family. The other 3 are duplexes. They're all going to be duplexes. We know that we can pay $250,000 because we marketed for renters in that area, right? So we know that if we rent it, if we're spending $250 on that property, we're going to be able to get $250,000 or $2,500 a month. We know because we're working backwards from saying every property we build needs to rent for 1% because that's where our equity needs to be. Does that make sense? Right? Now you see how exciting it is when we were talking about the last class, paying down the equity, because that accelerates your equity collection and then it accelerates how quickly you get to the place where you've got 1.5 million in equity. You've paid off your debt. It's 1.5 million free and clear. And now you're producing the 10 to 30 grand a month from the 1.5 to 4.5 million. Make sense? But this is the formula that we need. We need to know exactly how many houses we need. Does that make sense? So let's fill that in for a second. Let's take a break. If you have any questions, let me know. Exactly. Right. Okay. So everyone's got this now, right? We've all got we know how many houses we need to make 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand a month, right? We just use our formula, equity times production. So how much equity do I need? And then assuming that we get $150,000 houses, here's how many houses I need. Here's how many duplexes I need. Here's how many single families I need. Make sense? And we have that figured out. This has put you ahead of like everybody in real estate, right? Everyone out there trying to make these things happen, trying to, as far as like if you're looking at college or any other options as well, this helps us at least put a plan together, right? So here's the second part of the assignment. Now we're going to go out and today each of you have to find 5 properties that fit that criteria. And the other part to this is they cannot be overlapping. So nobody can find somebody else's properties, right? And so, no, I'm serious. If at least 5, man, don't push me. It's going to be 10. Because I don't want to hear this fucking bullshit about, our area, it's crowded, all this other LC nonsense. Man, listen to me. I sit here and I don't have a problem doing this stuff. I don't have a problem recording this video. I don't have a problem giving away more amazing. Look, I am beautiful and brilliant beyond belief, but even I have my limits. And when you come to me, I have no problem. I don't get tired, man. Shit don't crack. But the moment that I hear stupid shit like the same stuff that other people say about, my area or all the market's turning or blah, man, we find no matter what happens, this is what creates income immunity. These are bread and butter properties. They're easy to find. Actually, the 4 I talk about in the land, you asked me if that was her deals. No, they're not. The 5 that are being built right now, we've done a deal dissection on this as well. Are we still recording? We did a deal dissection on these as well, the vacant land deals. That's a separate deal that she did because now it's like, okay, wait a second. Now that I know that when you go out and market for renters or you do the lender agent model, we find out what our renters are paying. So when I find out, okay, renters are paying, let's say $1,200 a month. Well, let's say, what does that mean? That we can say that, $1,200 a month, that'd be $2,400 each side if I had a duplex, right? So let me go pick a duplex that rents, let's just see if we can fill a duplex or, do a GXM for that landlord, right? Now we know we can quickly find $2,400 a month. So the question is there any property I can buy right now for $240? Or you know what? Maybe we should build a property. Maybe we can build a property for $200,000 and we'll be well above the 1% because then our production goes up. It's not 8%, but it's above 8%. And by the way, like we talked about, 70% is going to be 8.6%. That 0.5% may not seem like it makes a difference, but it really does. But then when we start adding other things like we can build, each one of those duplexes we're building is going to be built for less than $200,000 and they're each renting for at least $1,250 a side. So we're going to be clearing $2,500 a month for our hero and he's going to be into it for less than $200,000. So it's going to be more than a 1% property. So this formula is worst case scenario that we need, 8 duplexes. And by the way, don't say this. We don't want to put this on the internet stuff, but like when we talk about the last hero example of the duplexes and how 8 of them, we're closing on the 9th one already. Actually, the close on the 10th one. The 9th one was just closed on and we're paying them off at light speed. You can get, we're not promising this and we're not putting this on there, but you have done the math. You should be able to see that you can get to this $10,000 10 grand a month in total passive income with the same 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000, recycling it, and you can get here in less than a year, less than 2 years, less than 18 months. I mean, it's amazing how fast you can get here when you understand what the game is and what you have to go out and collect. Does that make sense? But right now, let's just take our first step here. Everyone knows exactly how many houses that we're using. You should know, the whole point of this class now is you should know exactly how many houses you need to make $30,000 a month, $10,000 a month, 20 grand a month, right? We write that down, and now we know that I need 1%, $150,000, 1% houses that are producing this. By the way, when I used to work, the first thing the secret I learned from Herb Simon, the billionaire, he wasn't a billionaire when I met him, but he was up there. I did it basically at GXM. I didn't call it that at that time. He said the biggest secret is when the worst thing for commercial real estate, this was Simon DeBartolo Group, and that's how I met the guy, what's his name? No, the other guy, I didn't meet him, but I met his mom, a sexy vegan, his mom. They got plenty of money. That's why he's like that. He was on the Dr. Phil guy. They're a very wealthy family. They own the 49ers, I believe. It's the same group. But anyway, he said that the worst part about having commercial real estate is evicting tenants. So you have to find tenants that you're not going to evict. If you can do that, you're going to get rich. Find tenants that you're not going to have to evict. How do you find that out? When somebody calls in, you want to find out their criteria. So what I would do is somebody would call in and say, yeah, I want to open a pizza shop on the north side of, I want to 2,500 square feet somewhere on the north side. So I'd say, well, what street would you say? They'd be like, well, I don't know, like 96th Street. Okay, so you want 2,500 square feet on 96th Street. So immediately I would change that criteria. I'd say, what if it was 3,000 square feet and it was on the south side of the street instead of the north side of the street or whatever? And if they were okay with that, then you knew they're going to go out of business, because you talk to Whole Foods, you talk to Walmart, you talk to Starbucks, they know we want 2,300 square feet on the south side of this street between this block and this block. And if it's one block out of there, we're not going to do the deal. The Whole Foods that had opened, I had worked with one of their purchase managers, and there was a deal we had that was going to be on, I think it was 96th and Gray, I believe, somewhere around there. And it was going to be, they wanted 50,000 square feet, but they needed to build like 51,000 or 53,000, and they didn't do the deal because they've got their ROI razor sharp. They're not going to do the deal. They'll walk away. Now, that's the kind of criteria you want to have here. Very specific. I know exactly what I want. I know exactly what I'm looking for. If I find other things along the way, great. I can do those deals too. But for this passive income block, I know exactly what I want. Specificity breeds power. So this is our base, our 1%, our asset acquisition schedule moving forward. Creating a passive income, 30 grand a month, is really not that hard when you learn that it's just a matter of focus, consistency, and math. I love that. We always say this. I always ask people, how do you do these amazing things? People always say it's just math. Calvin Coolidge said the most common commodity in this country is unrealized potential. Wow. Nothing in the world can take place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. This is brilliant. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination are omnipotent. The slogan, press on, has solved and always will solve problems of the human race. This is brilliant, man. Calvin Coolidge copied it from me. Look, guys, this whole process is not that hard. Now that we know how many houses we want, we go out there and we fucking get them, right? We make it happen. Stay on it. It's not about doing it overnight. Like, I shouldn't have even said the 18-month thing or the 1-year thing. We do this over 5 years, 7 years. Have fun at this. Make sure it's fun, because if it's not fun, you're going to quit. You're going to give up. You're going to find something else to do. You're going to start looking at porn and, getting on Netflix. Don't do that stuff. This should be your porn. This should be your video games, right? This kind of stuff. Having these conversations, building these, putting these building blocks in place, because as long as we stay consistent with it, it's right there. Focus, consistency, and math. It's just a matter of math. Yes, you really can make 20, 30, 40, 50 grand a month. It's not that hard. It's just a matter of staying consistent, staying on it. Energy and persistence conquer all things. Ben Franklin. Success requires persistence, the ability to not give up in the face of failure. I believe that optimistic, explanatory style is key to persistence. Martin Seligman. Concentrate, that's the psychologist. Concentrate all your thoughts on the task at hand. The sun's rays do not burn until brought to a focus. I love that. Alexander Graham Bell. No thought of discouragement or disorder should ever be created, but only positive assurance, strong thoughts of desire, of divine activity, high frequency thinking, right? The feeling that with God all things are possible. The belief that we are one with the great mind, with the universe, right? These are the thoughts that make for success. Ernest Holmes. Guys, thank you for putting these up, these high frequency thoughts, these elevators. Guys, this isn't that difficult. The reason people screw up, it's like we talked about, they just stop. They don't stay with it. It's not that hard to go out and create 30 grand a month. We just went over the numbers. It's just a matter of basic math, and you can recycle the same 20, 30 grand a month and do this. And if you're not at that place, one of the reasons why we're working with so many heroes, that's okay. You're seeing the process. You're seeing the entire process come together. And as you do more deals, you'll strengthen your position to be able to do this and make it happen. Make sense? A river cuts through the rock not because of its power, but because of its persistence. We just got to stay on it, guys, and everything will be easy. How many houses do you need in order to make 30 grand a month passive income? You should know this. You should know all of the following. The 3 ways to liquidate equity. The only way we liquidate equity, we have to have a banker. Remember, member or a buyer or an investor agree on the value of anything. The mathematics of passive income, it's very simple. Equity times production. Very simple. And if we're going to use 8% as our production, and we know that our income is 30 grand, we can instantly solve for our equity. At any given moment, we know exactly how much equity you need to go out and collect and create. 3 ways to create productivity from real estate. We've talked about this. The tenants are just like the clients for a business. Look at each little property or all the properties together as a business, and the tenants are the clients, the customers. We've got to love on these people. This is your fan base. 3 ways to convert potential equity into actual equity. You guys clear on this? Number 1 is that we pay down the debt. That's essentially our main role that we're going to be playing here. Then we all can also increase the income or increase the value. We're just going to focus on paying down the debt. That converts that potential equity when we buy the property, right, into actual equity. Exactly how many houses you need to create 10 to 30 grand a month in passive income. This should be totally clear, right? This is the easiest answer. This is the whole point of today. Everyone should have that written down. Nobody does not have that written down, right? Everyone's got that written down, right? So excellent. We're going to go out. We're going to find those 5 properties right now. We're going to do this before the next break. We're not going to get up. We're not going to get up. We're going to do that right now. That's that easy. It's not that hard to do. Get out there and find those 5 houses. Guys, this is how many, are we still recording? How many houses do you need in order to make 30 grand a month passive income? This is not that difficult. If you want to be one of our investors, our heroes, let us know. Send Anna a text. This is tip number 4. Tip number 5 is even better than tip number 4. How is that even possible? I don't know. How amazing and brilliant can one human be? How one human being be? Guys, that's class for today. You should know exactly. Hopefully you followed along. I don't know how much of this was online, but you should be clear. Write down exactly how many houses you need, how many properties you need. We call them safe houses. We used to call them the GRS program. At 1%, $150,000 houses, or 1%, $200,000 duplexes. How many exactly do you need to create a passive income of $30,000 a month? You should know that. What a guy to be doing this. Guys, if you don't hit like and you don't share this video, somebody will come to your house and they will kill you in your sleep. I don't know. It might not happen. Why risk it? Do it now. I love you.